and say, welcome everyone to our webinar on pricing options and defaults. This is a really important webinar for us to be covering all this great information in FrameReady, because pricing is one of the most important things that you're doing with your FrameReady software program. So we're going to start out by going directly into the price codes file. You can access the price codes file either in the bottom right corner or in the top left corner of the screen, and that will take you directly to the pink background. Pink is for pricing. And here we are in molding, and the pricing options and defaults work for a couple of different groups, and the groups are listed on the left-hand side. So you can use them for molding, matboard, and fabric, and those are the top three, the big three that we usually use them for. You can also use them for mounting, and you can use them for glazing as well. Now, I'm going to suggest that you don't necessarily really want to use them for mounting unless you have the same markup applied to all of your mounting records, which is highly unlikely. The other thing that you would do is, let me just go to show you the price comparison. So you wouldn't necessarily have the same markup for all the different records at the same set price. So you're going to have different ones. You might have minimum price on some. You might use code tables on others. So rather than saying I'm going to use the same markup and set price on all of my mounting options, it's best to do them individually because they are unique and different. Whereas those items that are in molding or matboard, you can see that you're going to have possibly over 2,000 or 3,000 records in there. So you're going to use the pricing options and defaults in the groups that have the majority of records so that you can quickly and easily apply the same markup or a similar markup to the similar priced items, because you will have a number of items that have the exact same price. So that's the benefit of using the pricing options and defaults. So also the other reason that we have the pricing options and defaults is that when you get new items in, FrameReady is looking into the pricing options and defaults to find out what is the default that you have set up that you want to use specifically for this item. So that's why we have the pricing options and defaults. You have just gone into one individual record and set up the pricing on that record. That does not necessarily mean that all of the other records are going to use that same pricing. Or if you've applied it to a group, that still means that when the new molding or matboard or fabric comes in, it won't know which pricing structure you want to use. So we're going to take a look at the price codes file and see, first of all, where is the pricing options and defaults button located. Giving you a little hint already. Under the dark blue tab for pricing, whether it's the matboard pricing or if you're in fabric and you go to the fabric pricing, it's always listed under the dark blue tab. The only exception to this is that under the molding, under the frame pricing, you can not only access it through the dark blue tab for frame pricing, but also over here on the left-hand side of the screen, there's a button there that'll give you a shortcut directly to that. Now, the other buttons that are at the top of this screen that are important for the defaults is this one, which is the install program defaults, so that if you had a specific item and you thought, gee, I don't know how I want to price this, then what you could do is you could click on the button to say install the program defaults, and you could do that for all of your molding records, which I don't necessarily recommend, but you can do it also for just this record if you want. And then it puts in the default pricing from the default formula. The other button that you would want to take a look at is Lookup My Default. And what this button does is it actually accesses the pricing options and defaults to look up what's the default that you have chosen, and when you click on that, it automatically puts back in your default that you had from the pricing options and defaults button. Now, the little tooltip you just saw pop up there is a great one, so that if you wanted to copy the formula that you have in here and add it into the pricing options and defaults, this tooltip tells you to hold down the Shift key on your keyboard, and while you're pressing down on that, you're going to click once on that button, and it's going to copy this entire formula that you have, and it's pasted it down at the bottom of the screen. Now you can go over to the right-hand side, say this is my default. It's going to be specifically just for this one supplier. And now that you have it added in there, you can enter a note and go ahead and apply it. But that's the fast and easy way to add a new pricing options and default that you have already tested. So I'm going to delete that one since we don't need it. And we're going to go back out for a moment. The other button that's on here is the apply this formula to a group of records. This button functions exactly the same as the button over here on the left under the options and defaults. So we've got the apply to group button. And when I click on that, you're going to see that it's fairly similar to the button that we were just on. The only difference is that this one knows that this is an in-stock item that needs to be omitted, so that if there are any items or categories that you want to omit in FrameReady, this will pick that up. However, if I go back to this button over here on the right-hand side, it doesn't know if there are any categories which need to be omitted. So it would apply it to anything that you have omitted as well. The other reason that I like to use the one under the pricing options and defaults is that it's a good idea to test your formula here first, so that if you are on this screen and you decide that you wanted to change the markup on there, and then you decide that you want to go and apply it to all of the records, what could happen is that you actually are going to apply a formula that doesn't work. Everything looks fine right now. It's when I click out of the box that you're going to see that there's a mistake that I've just made in this formula, okay? And I would have applied that to all of my records, and then none of the prices would have worked. So it's always a good idea to test the formula first, find out if there's something missing, or, you know, are you getting the prices that you want? Then go ahead, press down on the Shift key, add it into the pricing options and defaults. Or if you already have a default in there for that record, then you can actually just go ahead and copy everything that's in the boxes if you want, and then add it in yourself manually. I find it's a little easier just to press down on the Shift key, hold the Shift key down on your keyboard, click once on the pricing options and defaults button, and then it will put that formula in for you. Okay, so now let's go to the next section that we want to take a look at. What are your markups? How do you know what your markups are? One of the things that happens when you open up your program in the morning is that FrameReady will check the markup integrity for you. And if you don't open your program up each day, you leave it open all the time, you're missing that step. But that's okay, you can still do it. On this screen, at the very top of the screen, you can click on the word perform and go down to check markup integrity. And when you click on that, it runs the script to check and make sure that you're not giving anything away for free. So I have two items on here that are missing a pricing formula. So you can see that there is nothing listed under the price per foot. So these are going to be given away for free if it's entered onto a work order. Now, with these two items, there's a little message box that comes up here, and it says you can apply the defaults to this. And if I do click on the OK button to apply the defaults, this first record will have the default applied to it, and that will be fine. It will take care of it. However, the second record on here still will not have the default applied because there is no cost, there's no chop, there's no join. It doesn't know, even if there was a default that was applied to it, it wouldn't work. So I'm going to go ahead and click that just to apply that to them. So it's done it that quickly. Everything's been applied. I'm going to click OK. All right. And now if I go back up to the top of the screen and do that again, it's going to come up and say, wait a minute, we couldn't do anything with this one. So always a good idea if you're doing that, do it twice just to check. So this one, knowing that it cannot be fixed, unless you were to go in and manually enter what the cost is, manually enter what the width of the item is, because it does need those two very important factors to calculate a retail price, has to have the width and a cost. Knowing that it doesn't have either of those, it may have been something that somebody started to enter in, wasn't sure about it, so I'm going to delete that record. It is of no use to you if it doesn't have a retail price on it. Okay, moving on to the next section. looking at your markups, and I'm thinking, gee, do I have my markups? What are my markups? Because it could happen to you that when you are looking at your markups, let's go to the right-hand side of the screen, you're looking at individual ones and saying, is this the one that I'm using specifically for this record? Or if I go to the next record, is it a different markup, even though it's still a Nielsen metal? Or the one after that, is that a different markup, even though that's a Nielsen metal? So that could happen that you're thinking, oh my goodness, which ones are my markups? Or is the one of these just an anomaly because it's a discontinued record for some reason? I left an old price structure on there. But when you go to the pricing options and defaults, take a look at what you have currently on a record, go into your pricing options and defaults, and look to see if you have a default specifically for metal frames. And does it match the current pricing that you have? If not, then there's a good chance that you need to apply the new markups that you're using to your pricing structure. I've looked at some of the molding records that people have for their molding, and what I find sometimes is that it will say in there cost times 5.6 or some markup in there, and that's all it says, because you've upgraded FrameReady from multiple versions before, maybe version 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 and it got locked in at a pricing structure, and that hasn't changed. So really good idea to go in, and if you are looking at these and you see that you just have a single entry in there, check to make sure you have a default and go ahead and apply your defaults. It may take a few minutes to do that, but it's well worth it. Okay, the other thing you could do possibly is to compare two items together, so that if you do have two records that are similar in cost and you want to look at them in a list view, use the price comparison button to do that, and then you'd be able to see if they do have the same cost, do they have different markups, and what's the retail price. So if you're deciding that you want to go ahead with one or the other, this would be a chance for you to say, which one should I be using, and then change your markup, your default, and say, yes, this is the one that I want to use. I'm going to add this to my defaults and use that markup instead of the one that maybe is a lower value or not as profitable for you. So again, how do you know which markups are being applied? Compare the numbers here that you have, and then go into the pricing options and defaults and see what is in that screen. So let's go directly into the pricing options and defaults screen and take a look at what's happening there. So if you came into this screen and there were no defaults at all, the question is, how do you know which default is the right one for you to use? If I go back to this screen and let's say that I'm missing, there's nothing in there, I'm going to go and take a look at Roma. So I'm going to go find all of the records for Roma. And you could do this just for one supplier, or you could do it for all of your suppliers at once and just scan through. But chances are you would have had a different markup for wood and liners and fillets and extenders, and a different one for metals and plastics. That's usually how they're grouped together. So if I'm looking at this one particularly for Roma, if I go to the first record and take a look at the markups that I have here, and I notice that I've got a 3.5 sliding scale markup going on here, and I take a look at the markups on the next several records, and they're the same. Now, here's the trick. If I go down to the bottom of the screen, and I look down here, and I have a different markup. It's the 5 sliding scale going down. And I'll take a look at the list view at the bottom here as well, going down to the very last record and scrolling down here. And I notice that they're not the same. I'm missing my shipping. I've got a different markup on these records. And the answer for that is that what happens is if you don't have a default at all in your FrameReady program, then FrameReady will add in the default that we have built in, and that's the one that's underneath this button here, install the program defaults. So if you did not have any defaults at all in your pricing options and defaults, then FrameReady will give all new molding and new Matboard the default that that came installed with the program. And of course, we want you to modify the markups and the set price and everything in there to be specific to your business, because we want you to be as profitable as possible. And there's no way that the same markup is going to be used for somebody who's in San Francisco or somebody who's in central Nebraska or somebody who's in, you know, the East Coast. So markups vary from location to location. And once you've got your markup set up in there, you want to have it in the pricing options and defaults. So you know that you can hold down the shift key to add that in. So if I go back up to the top of the screen to the one that I want to use, which has my shipping code built into it, I'm going to press down the shift key and I'm going to click once on the pricing options and defaults. And now what happens is when I click on the option for default down in the bottom right corner of the screen, it automatically marks that it's wood, because that's the record that I was on, and it has auto-filled the supplier. Now, if you're planning on using this one for your generic one, then just remove the supplier name, delete it, click on it, and hit the backspace key to take it out. But if you do want to keep it in there or add the supplier, click on the down arrow and then select the supplier that you want that for. You can also identify that this is going to be for other groups as well, liner, fillet, and extender. And once you've added a record in there, my recommendation is that you would add in the date to say created. And then as you're modifying this, you're going to go through, and I think I have one up here, yeah, so that after you've created it, every time you add a new note in here saying that you've changed something in there, that it gives you a little bit of history to know, when did I do this? How long ago was it that I last looked at my markups? Because you want to look at your markups at least, if not once a year, maybe twice a year at least. Just say, let me check and make sure that everything is okay in there. You don't want to let it go too long. So once you've added in that markup, mark that it's been created, and then most importantly, click the Apply to Group button. And that's going to apply it to all of the Roma molding that has either a category of, a group of wood, liner, fillet, or extender. And we're going to go into that screen in just a moment. Do you want to talk to you about reading this screen? When you are looking at this screen for the first time, usually at the top of the screen, you'll have the ones that are the 3 standard ones that you're going to get in your FrameReady program, which is the default specifically for wood, liner, fillet, and extender. It does not have a supplier because that is the one that's generic. It applies it to everyone. Okay, moving down, we have the default for metal and plastic. And again, no supplier. This is the default one. It applies it to everyone. There's a little note in here saying, do not delete this record. If you have a different generic one, then you can go ahead and delete it. That's okay. But you should have one record in here that is generic and does not have a supplier listed, so that it is applied to all of your suppliers, so that any new suppliers coming in will have a markup applied to them. Going down a little further, you'll also see one that's usually in the default version of FrameReady that is the default specifically for Larson Juhl, showing you that you can have one specifically for a supplier. And usually we have that one in there because we've added in the width multiplier for Larson Juhl, because when you're ordering your molding from them, they, rather than every supplier has a different waste calculator, and theirs is a little bit higher, so we've added in that 1.25, so that if you calculate you need 6 feet specifically for the molding, and you look at their chart for the same amount, for the same sizes, it's going to say that you need 6.3 feet, and then it's rounded up to 6.5. So this was the number that we found worked best for that. But today this shows that you could have a specific one for a supplier. And that's how you can read that screen. Moving up to the top again here, you'll notice that in some cases I've said I want to omit a category, and that's another great way of saying I don't want certain items to be affected by the pricing. And we're going to take a look at that in just a moment as well. So the buttons at the top of the screen, let's take a look at those. Up here at the top, if you need to create a new record, you can do that just by clicking on New Record. It's going to create a blank record here for you so that you can go in and fill in all of the information if you want. It's a little bit more laborsome, and I definitely recommend that if you are doing that, you want to use the Select button to apply it to an item, specifically a Roma item, if this is just for Roma, to check the pricing before you apply it to the group. There's also the Find button, and this can be handy as well if you're saying, I want to see all the ones that I've got specifically for wood here, and then press the Enter key on your keyboard, and it's going to find all of my defaults that are applied to a wood group. And there are 3 of them on the list. So that helps you to focus in on what you want to see, rather than if you clicked on Show All, it's showing all of the different formulas that are in here. And I do have some, you may have them as well. We do have some sample formulas that are in there that you could take a look at and say, is this something that I would like to use? If not, feel free to delete it. Don't think that you need to hang on to that just in case, because these are listed on our website as well. And you can go take a look at those on the online help to see if this was a formula that you wanted to use, and do different ways of pricing things. So if you did decide that you wanted to keep them, go ahead. If you want to delete them, do that as well. They will give you instructions as to why this item is here. If I'm ordering by length, but I want to price it by chop or join, okay, then you have a different formula that you can use. So there's lots of variety that you can use in there. The important thing is to have something in your pricing options and defaults. Now, the rule on defaults is this, that if you have a generic formula, you must have one of those, and you do have that one here. If you decide to apply this one to a group of records, and you also have one that is supplier specific, you need to go to that supplier specific one after you've done the generic one. So if I did this one and I applied the Larson Juhl one first, that's great, it's done, it's okay. However, if I go back up to the top and I apply this generic one that's also going to apply to all the wood liners and billets and extender, regardless of who the supplier is, it's going to be applied to everyone, then I need to go back down to my one specifically for Larson, to the one specifically for Roma, and apply those after I've done the generic one. So really important that you go in that sequence and applying the generic one first. The other rule is that you can't have 2 formulas for the same supplier. So if I already have one specifically for Roma, and then I say that this one is also for Roma, it's very confusing for the program. What's going to happen is it's going to go to the very first record that it finds, and it's going to apply this formula for Roma, not the second one. So do check to make sure that you don't have any duplicates as well. So just another thing to take a look at there. If you want to have your supplier listed here down at the bottom, you can do that. And then this is applied just to Roma. The other option is to have it in this group here under the set price, but the difference is that the only thing changing on here is the set price. Whereas if I look at the formula here, this is a different markup on this one than it is for the Roma frames down here. So if I want the formula to be different, then I need to use the supplier specific one. If I want to have the same formula for all of my suppliers, but I want to have a different set price to cover shipping or labor or any of those other things that are a factor that you need to have added in, then you can use the set price to do that. So, Chrissy, I think it's a good time for us to take a break, and let's see what you've got in the polls today.
Sounds good. All right, we're just going to launch it here. Do you have or use one of the following, one or more of the following? You can choose any of them. Default markups for specific suppliers, defaults for just one molding group, the note field to document changes to pricing, the ship join code table, or width multiplier.
And you can check as many as you want, right?
Yeah, and if you have any questions, feel free to type them out in the question section and Carol can answer your questions for you.
Really hoping that this is going to inspire people to go back and take a look at their pricing options and defaults, because this is a place where if you don't check it once in a while, you could wind up with an old formula that is being applied to your markups or all the new molding coming in. And in actual fact, you've created a new one, but you didn't add it to the pricing options and defaults. So the new molding coming in is not using that one.
All right, I'm going to close the poll.
Okay.
Results.
Oh, okay, excellent. The specific suppliers an option, yeah. Just one molding, yeah. Oh, that's great. And the shipping and join code. Okay, super. And the width multiplier. Oh, wow. So people are using a good selection of the program.
That's awesome.
That's wonderful. Yeah, lots of options available to you, and use as many as you can. Excellent. So I'm going to go back into FrameReady again. We have default formulas specifically for molding and matboard and fabric, so that when you receive the program, those defaults will be in there. And if I was to go to the matboard default and just take a look at that, so clicking on the install program defaults, and you do have the choice to say, is that for this record or all? We're going to go for this record, and I believe I have the default in there already. So there's a number of different options. There's no code, but it does use the min price, the set price, and the markup. So that's the default formula that we have for the Matboard if you wanted to use that one. As I said, my recommendation is that you're going to modify this so that it's going to be best suited for your location that you are in. The other thing that might be a little bit confusing when you're looking at it, this says that this is the markup. And yet, if I go to the formula screen, the molding screen, when I go to molding, you're going to see that over here it's a little bit different. It says formula. And the reason for that difference is that in the Matboard section, there is only one wholesale cost. So I can have the markup that I want right over here and on the right-hand side. But when I'm in the molding section, I do need to identify whether it's going to be a multiplier of join or a multiplier of the cost or the chop, because you have three options for pricing. So that's why we have the word formula here. The other option, of course, is that you can do some arbitrary pricing, and you could just say that I want this to be $15 per foot, and it's done. But of course, then you're going to change this and say that this is an in-stock item, because we don't want the pricing to be affected by the markup when it's in there. And I'm going to be covering that a little bit. I think I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. So the markups that we have for Matboard are a sliding scale markup. And again, as I said, because there are so many Matboard records, we've got a sliding scale in there so that as it goes up to the next group, it's going to move to the next markup on here. So if you have a sliding scale, that's great, because you can apply that same formula to all of your Matboard records. Now, the other option that we had in the past, and I'm not sure that I actually have it in here. No, I don't. The other option that we've had in the past for this is, and I'll just create a new one right now, is that we could have something based on code tables, saying that if this is the case and the cost is less than $6, then you could use code table number AA or whatever code table you have created. And then you could use code tables. And there are people that are using those as well, because they've created a code table specifically based on selected sizes or a quarter of a sheet or half a sheet or of the Matboard or whatever you want that to be. And then whatever your last choice is, it would be at the bottom here. There we go, and that's the last one. So we've got, if this is the case and the cost is less than $6, you're going to use this code or this code or this code. And you could use that as an option as well for your markups on the Matboard. Generally though, we just usually have our default markup at the top, which is the sliding scale, half the wholesale cost, and then a minimum price added on. If you want to know more about the Matboard pricing structure in detail, we do have a video called the Matboard pricing options. Going to the next section, which is that option to opt out of the markups, the default. So if we did have an item that we had some arbitrary pricing on, and let's go back to that item that I was looking at, and I can say, here's my $15 that I have. It's a fixed number, and you can change that to anything that you want at any time. But I don't want my default to be applied to this, which is why when I apply them through here, I've got it specifically set up, if I'm applying a metal frame, to omit the in-stock item. So it will only be applied to those regular items, not my in-stock items. Now, if I'm on this screen and I happen to click on the Lookup My Default button, a message will pop up letting you know that this record is an in-stock and the default will not be applied. However, if you want to apply it and ignore the markup you have in there right now, then you can do that. Just click the yes, and it will put in the default pricing structure that you have in there. In some cases, what people want to do with their mat board, because you may have a go-to white mat or a go-to black mat that you use all the time, you may not want to have this min price added on, because what the min price does, and I'm going to just add that in there for a moment, and let's put it in there. So what the min price does is it gives you the protection that if you are ordering in specifically a Congo green mat or atomic orange, then, and the customer only needs an 8x10, that you are going to at least have the price of the mat board covered, plus $5 for your labor and expense and ordering the mat and everything else that you have to do. But if this is your go-to white or black mat that you have in stock all the time, you don't necessarily need to worry about the small sizes because it's already covered. So that's one of the reasons why I may want to put that this is my in-stock mat. I don't want the minimum price covered on this. So it's protected now. The only thing for you to remember, though, is that if I do go back in and I change the markups in here to increase them by the numbers, or if I increase them using a percentage, just saying that I'm going to take this and increase all of the markups by 10%, and that will do it. And now if I go back to that in-stock mat board and I want them to be increased by the 10%, but not have the min price, that's a good reason to use Lookup My Default. Yes, put those all in, so it's increased the markups by 10%, but now I'm going to go back into the minimum price and remove the minimum price so that I can still sell the smaller sizes for a lower price because I have my in-stock mat available. Going to take a look at the set price in field in this section as well. You could have a fixed dollar amount in here. You could have, same as we do down here, you could have a formula or any combination. This is basically saying round it off to take half of the cost, take the cost divided by 2 and round it off to the nearest decimal of 10. And that puts your cost in there for the set price, but you could have anything in there that you want. More details about the set price are covered in the basic molding video and also in the Matboard pricing video as well. Now, if we go back to the other column for the molding, there's another additional one in here that's not in the Matboard, and that is the minimum and surcharges one. And everything that's under this is also covered in the basic molding video as well. So do watch that video. It has a lot of information in it. Going back to this section again, the notes section, as I mentioned before, be sure to put your notes in here anytime that you come in to change things. Put the newest note at the top of the screen, and that's going to give you a little bit of history and track record to keep a track of everything that's happening. All right, we're going to cover a few other buttons that we haven't even looked at yet and everything that's in this section. But before we do that, Chrissy, would you like to bring up the next poll that we're going to run?
You bet. I thought you'd never ask.
Great.
All right, so this is another do you have or use defaults for mounting, defaults for glass, sliding code tables for mats, combined formula pricing, and omit category. I wasn't aware that there was a shipping formula in FrameReady. Can Carol look at this today?
Yes, certainly. Well, let's take a quick look at that. It's a great feature. One of the things that you can do with the shipping formula is that you can create a code table. So in here, under the minimum surcharges, there's the ship code. You can click on the code tables here, and that will go directly to the code table. You can create multiple code tables in here so that you can see, if it's less than 48 United inches, how much you're going to apply. And then once you have created those code tables, go back to the frame pricing, pricing options and defaults, and under the minimum and surcharges, this is where you want to add that code. And I have that specifically added in down here. So when you click on it, you'll get that drop-down list, find the code that you have created, and it will add it in. Now, you are not going to see those prices added in on this screen here, but you will see them added in on the work orders. That should answer that question. And Chrissy, if you want to go back to the poll and show us the results.
Yep, I'll share them right now.
Excellent. Okay. So here we go. Oh, wow. Look at, okay. Defaults for glass. Okay. And combined formula pricing. That's an option. That's a good one. We should have looked at that too. And the omit category. Great. Wow. I'm so surprised that some people are using the defaults for the glass. That's really interesting. Yeah, because, and just looking at that, just going to say that if you are using the pricing options and defaults for glass over here on the right hand side and got something marked for glass, if I was to mark this one for glass, then that means that that is the markup for every one of my glass types, regardless of whether it's OP3 acrylic or acrylic clear, or if it's museum glass or regular glass. They're all going to have the same markup. And I think that's probably one of the good things about this, is to have the same markup for a large group of records. I just didn't expect people to be using it for the glass, so that's neat. Okay, so let's take a look at these other buttons that are on that screen. So if we go back to the pricing options and defaults, and I suppose it really doesn't matter which one I'm in, whether it's the Matboard or the molding. I think probably I'm going to go back to molding, just because I think people have more options usually in that screen. They have more variables that they use for different suppliers and such. So on this screen, when you're taking a look at it, there's an Enlarge button. This is a great way to check to see if something has gone wrong. If you click on the Enlarge button, it's going to give you a different format to look at this. And if one of these semicolons is missing, that's one of the best telltale factors for, hi, the price isn't working. I've got question marks showing up on my screen. Going in here, because it lines everything up with this font, so that you can see if something is out of line or missing. Because if I was missing specifically that one, then you would see how it would indent, and you would think, gosh, it shouldn't. So I know that I'm missing something in the formula, and it's a little easier to read. The other great feature in here is at the top of the screen, if you're having problems with your formula and thinking, gee, it's not working, I can't see what's wrong with it, click on this button at the top, email this to us, and this will go directly to our support email, and we'll take a look at it and get back to you to say, hey, I can see what's wrong, or I can see why this isn't working, and we'll give you the information. We'll pop it into our screen, test it, and see how to fix it. So you can click on there. That Enlarge button is also available at the bottom of the formula screen here. You'll see the Enlarge button down at the bottom right-hand corner. Click on that, and it goes to a different layout as well. But we still have the email to text support and the ability to print it out if you wanted to print it to save it for your records for some reason. So those two Enlarge buttons are pretty important. The other one is the Select button. And that's the one where I would suggest that if you are testing a formula and you've made changes to it here, click on the Select button. But before you do that, make sure that you're on a record. So if I was testing specifically for Larson Juhl, I want to make sure that the record that I'm looking at is a Larson Juhl record, not a Nielsen metal. So I would want to find a Larson record in here. There we go. We've got the Larson record. So now I can go back into the pricing options and defaults, make any changes that I want to this formula here. There we go. I've made a change, and now click the Select button to test it and see, you know, how the prices look, that it worked, it didn't create any question marks, and now I can go back and apply it to the group. So that's the reason that you would use the Select button. Delete button, I've showed you how you can delete items in there. The duplicate button is also very handy if you, let's say you have a formula that you're using for a specific supplier and you want to create another one, the exact same formula for a different supplier, and then maybe you're going to change the set price, or you're going to change the minimums because they have a different minimum when they're shipping to you. So you can easily create the same formula in here and everything else is the same. It's a fast, easy way to do that. Make sure that you do update the information on here though if you have notes that you've duplicated as well. And then the last thing you want to do is, even though you've created it, you still need to go apply it. And this is where we're going to take a look at this screen. Clicking on the Apply to Group screen here is going to give us the option to say if you wanted to apply this only to the length cost records, leave that in there. However, if you want that to apply to all of the records, remove that. Keep it blank, and then this will apply to the length, chop, and join records for this one specific supplier. If I had entered in the omit on there, then it would automatically have filled in the omit. You could use the omit for anything you want. You could create your own. We usually have use the word in stock because it works with another portion of the program so that we can omit all of those records if we wanted to. Or you could create your own record on the items that is called omit or I don't know, stock or whatever, high price or low price, best price, whatever you want to call it. Just make sure it's the same consistently on all the records because you only have one omit. You can't use multiple omits. And what you want to do is, this is where the category is that you're going to choose to say that you want to omit this record, have some special pricing in here, or change the pricing in some way so that the pricing options and defaults for that specific supplier will not be applied to this one particular molding or mat board. So if you do want it to be applied, remove the in stock and then it will be applied to it. So I'm going to go back into this section, apply to group. Down here, it's showing you everything that you saw on the previous screen. This is your chance to double check to make sure you haven't missed anything before you click the apply button. As I mentioned before, make sure that you apply the ones that are generic first and then the ones that are specific to a supplier. When you are doing this and you click the apply button, it is going to take a little while to apply to the records, especially if you've got a large record volume, such as one of the fabric liners, which has every combination of every fabric with every liner, or a supplier that has a large selection. So it may take a little while to do that. You could decide that if you only changed the pricing for the cost section, you could apply it just to the cost, and that might speed up the process for you a little bit. But that's basically the information about that section. So as I've said before, double check, make sure that your markups are the ones that you want them to be. Check to see that you do have something listed in here. Remove the ones that you're not using. If you don't need it, delete it. Okay, and then that'll make it easier for you to see only the ones that you're working with, or click on the button in the top right corner to show the defaults only. These are the ones that you are actually using, and that makes it easier to see all of them, so that even though I have 8 total, I'm only using 5 of them right now, and those are the ones that I'm looking at. That by clicking on that show defaults only button. Then I want to say thank you to everyone for their time today. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar, and I hope that you've learned something from this that you can take home and use to make your business better.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.